Tension had been brewing in the Palacios household for months, but on a day in late August 2019, things finally snapped. Inside their small home, a heated argument between Willie Palacios and his daughter, Ariana, took a dark turn. What started as harsh words quickly escalated, crossing the line from anger to something much more dangerous. Ariana Palacios was born in the late 1980s in Argentina. She was the youngest child of Willie Palacios and Delicia, both Bolivian immigrants who had settled in the province of Buenos Aires in search of a better future for their family. Delicia found work at a lingerie workshop, while Willie, who had arrived in Argentina at the age of 30, spent his life in the funeral business. Although he managed to open his own funeral parlor, it eventually failed, and in his later years, he worked for a prominent funeral home in Buenos Aires that catered to celebrities and well-known personalities. Though little is known about her early years, it was evident that the household atmosphere was tense, with relationships marred by conflict. Some sources revealed that the Palacios children often witnessed their father being violent towards their mother. Tragically, it seemed that Delicia, in turn, took out her frustrations on Ariana. Despite the turmoil at home, Ariana idolized her father, whom she described as a well-mannered and impeccably dressed man. He was strict, but he was the one who granted her permission to attend gatherings and parties with her friends. The relationship between Ariana and her mother was fraught with tension. They often clashed, and during one family gathering, their argument escalated to the point where they shouted at and shoved each other. Family members had to intervene to prevent the situation from worsening. Around the age of 20, Ariana moved out and started living with a man named Luis. At 24, she became pregnant with her first and only child, but soon after she decided to end the relationship with Luis and return to her parents' home. When her daughter was born, the grandparents were overjoyed. They lived in a working-class area on the western outskirts of Buenos Aires. In October 2017, Ariana met Adrian through a dating app, and they began a romantic relationship. Adrian treated Ariana's daughter well, visiting them at their home, and the couple would sometimes spend weekends together at Adrian's house. By this time, Ariana, who was now 30, worked at a call center in Buenos Aires. To supplement her income, she sold clothes online and also offered hair straightening services, making her very active on social media. Her daughter, now 6 years old, was the apple of her grandparents' eyes. However, it was noted by some that Willie seemed to have an unhealthy obsession with his granddaughter, often hovering around her as if he and Delicia believed they were her parents. This added further strain to the already fragile relationship between Ariana and her mother. On August 28, 2019, Ariana had a heated argument with her mother and told a friend that she needed to talk. On top of that, she also had a bitter dispute with her boyfriend, Adrian, which left her in tears. The next day, Ariana's phone went silent, and no one heard from her again. Her sudden disappearance, coupled with her absence from social media, alarmed her close friends, who immediately began searching for her. In the days that followed, the events surrounding Ariana's disappearance became increasingly strange. Adrian was one of the first to contact the Palacios family, and when he spoke with Willie, he was met with various excuses and evasions. Willie told Adrian that Ariana had found a new partner, decided to change jobs, and no longer wanted to continue their relationship. He even suggested that Adrian should move on and not worry about searching for her, claiming that she needed a fresh start but would be fine with her 6-year-old daughter. The conversation left Adrian uneasy. It seemed odd that his girlfriend's father was urging him to stay away, especially since Ariana, with whom he would have celebrated 2 years of dating on October 14th, had given no indication that she wanted to end their relationship. As days passed, Ariana's friends grew increasingly frustrated as they tried in vain to contact her. Unable to get any response, they began reaching out to her parents' home, with some even visiting in person to inquire about her. Willie was always the one to answer, providing a variety of bizarre and contradictory explanations. Initially, he claimed that Ariana's phone had broken, preventing her from contacting anyone. Then he told someone else that she had gone to another city to sell some products. To another friend, he suggested that Ariana was likely with a new boyfriend, as she had a habit of frequently changing partners, and that was why she wasn't responding to anyone. As her friend's desperation grew, the family's apparent lack of concern only deepened their worry. They started coordinating among themselves, reaching out to Adrian and even contacting Ariana's co-workers in search of any information. When they spoke to her colleagues at the call center, they learned that Willie had visited the office days earlier to inform them that his daughter had traveled to Tierra del Fuego, one of Argentina's most remote provinces. Noelia, who had been Ariana's close friend since childhood, took it upon herself to lead the search for her missing friend. She was well aware of the tensions between Ariana and her mother, the deep love Ariana had for her daughter, and the frequent arguments she had with her boyfriend. Despite these issues, Ariana had never expressed a desire to flee, making her sudden disappearance all the more puzzling and alarming to Noelia. Determined to take action, Noelia reached out to 2 mutual friends who were also concerned. The 3 of them, like amateur detectives, set out to piece together the clues. They spoke with Adrian, who confided in them that he found Willie's behavior highly suspicious. As concern grew, Ariana's friends began applying pressure on her family. They called daily, knocked on the door repeatedly, and persistently asked for information, urging the family to report Ariana's disappearance to the authorities. They were convinced that Ariana would never abandon her daughter for such a long time without any contact, especially since she was always attentive to her needs. The situation seemed increasingly bizarre. When asked about Ariana's whereabouts, Willie would offer vague and unconvincing explanations, often stating that she had left to clear her head and that it was better for her to forget about her troubles with Adrian. However, the Palacios family consistently refused to involve the police. On September 19th, nearly 20 days after her disappearance, Ariana's phone suddenly became active again. At precisely 11:32 a.m., a text message was sent to her friends. To everyone's surprise, the message claimed that Ariana was fine but unable to respond further. Each of her friends received a generic message, something Ariana had never done before. The unusual wording of the message, including the phrase, "How are you, dear?" a term Ariana disliked because she found it insincere, only heightened their suspicions. As the friends pressed the family to report the disappearance, Willie warned them that contacting the police could lead to Luis, Ariana's ex-partner and father of her daughter, seeking custody of the little girl, thereby separating her from her mother. Reluctantly, Willie decided to file a report with the authorities, but instead of reporting his daughter missing, he filed a complaint against her friends, accusing them of harassment. Despite the family's resistance, Noelia mustered the courage to go to the local police station to report that her friend had been missing for over 20 days without any explanation. However, she was met with a wall of bureaucracy and indifference. Initially, the police dismissed her concerns, insisting that only a close family member could file such a report. Even after explaining the strained relationship with Ariana's family, the police were uncooperative. After days of persistence, on the afternoon of Wednesday, September 25th, Noelia returned to the precinct with evidence, showing the social media posts she had made about Ariana's disappearance. It was only then that the police took her seriously and initiated an official investigation into Ariana's whereabouts. A few days later, the most shocking and horrifying revelation came to light within Ariana's family. Under mounting pressure, Willie broke down and confessed to his son Mauricio that on the morning of August 28th he had killed Ariana during a heated argument, stabbing her with a knife. He then buried her body in the backyard of their home. Mauricio, who had always had a strained relationship with his father and knew of his violent tendencies, was stunned by the confession. He immediately went to the authorities and relayed everything Willie had told him. The prosecutor ordered the immediate arrest of Willie and the preservation of the crime scene. Willie, 62 years old, was arrested and charged with aggravated homicide, both due to his relationship with the victim and the fact that the crime was femicide. During his interrogation, Willie confirmed his earlier confession, admitting that he had attempted to cover up the crime by providing false leads and contradictory stories to Ariana's friends. He revealed that he had purchased a new phone, inserted Ariana's SIM card, and sent text messages pretending to be her, all while she was already dead. Willie explained that the murder took place while his wife was at work. After killing Ariana, he buried her body in a secluded part of the backyard, covering it with plastic sheets that Delicia apparently never noticed. On Monday, September 30th, 2019, police officers, firefighters, and forensic experts arrived at Willie's property to conduct a search. At 10:30 a.m., a police-trained sniffer dog entered the scene and quickly located the spot where Ariana's body was buried. 2 hours later, the experts unearthed her remains from the garden, just a short distance from her former bedroom. It was a grim discovery. The knife used to kill her was still lodged in the left side of Ariana's neck. After nearly 8 hours of work at the crime scene, the partial reconstruction conducted by the police determined that the murder took place inside the house. Forensic tests using luminol revealed positive results on parts of the floor, confirming that the victim's body had been dragged to the spot where her father had buried her. What made the scene even more macabre for the detectives was that Willie had constructed a rabbit hutch directly over the burial site, a place designed for Ariana's daughter and the other grandchildren to play. The forensic autopsy revealed that Ariana had suffered 3 stab wounds to the left side of her neck. While 2 of the wounds were superficial, the third severed the carotid artery and also damaged the larynx, leading to her death within moments. At this point in the investigation, detectives had to rule out the possibility of accomplices and clarify many doubts regarding the involvement of Ariana's family circle. It was hard to believe that none of her closest relatives had noticed anything unusual after such a violent confrontation and a horrific crime. Even more striking was the fact that the investigation had been initiated by a friend's persistence rather than by a direct family member. One of Ariana's friends recalled a message from Ariana shortly before her disappearance, in which Ariana mentioned having a heated argument with her mother, hinting that her mother was not who she seemed to be. That was the last message she received from Ariana's phone, The fact that most of the family resisted filing a missing person report was one of the significant questions investigators wanted to clear up. In his statement to the authorities, Adrian highlighted that the relationship between Ariana and her mother had been strained since mid-July. While he never noticed anything particularly strange during his weekend visits, he did observe that the two women argued frequently. A crucial testimony in the case came from Nadia, a neighbor in the area where the Palacios family lived. Nadia had several conversations with Willie after Ariana disappeared. On one occasion, Willie came to her house and asked if she could pick up his granddaughter from kindergarten, explaining that Ariana was unable to do so. Although Nadia found it strange, she agreed to help. At that time, Willie mentioned that Ariana had left but implied it was only temporary. Later that day, after picking up the child, Nadia sent a message to Ariana to let her know everything was fine with her daughter, but the message never got through. When Nadia returned the child that afternoon, Willie told her that Ariana had left for good, discarding her phone because she wanted to start a new life. He even mentioned that Ariana had been offered a new job in another city. It also seemed odd to her when, on September 19th, she received a message from an unknown number supposedly from Ariana, saying that she was traveling and focusing on a new boyfriend. The message was full of spelling errors, which was unusual for Ariana. This same message was sent to several of Ariana's friends, and all were incorporated into the case to determine whether Willie himself sent them or if someone else was involved in the deception. Noelia, Ariana's childhood friend, testified that during one of her many visits to the Palacios household, where she urged them to report Ariana's disappearance, Willie dismissed Ariana as a lazy woman who had likely run off with a man, abandoning her daughter. Noelia, who knew her friend well, was convinced this was a lie, as Ariana would never leave without her daughter. One potential trigger for the crime, highlighted by several witnesses during the investigation, was a labor lawsuit that Ariana had filed years earlier, which she appeared to be close to winning. Ariana had mentioned to several friends that once she received the settlement, she would rent a place to live alone with her daughter. Investigators hypothesized that Willie may have committed the crime to prevent Ariana from taking the child away, as various testimonies suggested he had an unusual obsession with his granddaughter that went beyond typical grandparental affection. To leave no stone unturned, the investigation stage took 2 years. Finally, on October 22, 2021, the trial against Willie Palacios began. He faced a life sentence for aggravated homicide, considering that the victim was his descendant and that the crime was committed under circumstances of gender-based violence. During the trial, Willie's confession and the extensive evidence gathered by the prosecution were presented. Initially, Willie was present in the courtroom, but at the request of 2 witnesses for the prosecution, he was asked to leave and listen to the proceedings from an adjacent room. Key witnesses in the trial included Delicia, the victim's mother, who by then had become Willie's ex-wife, and Mauricio, Ariana's brother. What the judges heard from Delicia, who was ultimately not charged as an accomplice, was a chilling account of her 43-year relationship with the aggressor. Throughout her testimony, Delicia never referred to her ex-husband by name, only calling him "that man," and recounted years of domestic abuse she endured while they were together. It seemed that the Palacios household had turned into a living nightmare starting in July 2019, when Willie lost his job and his violent behavior escalated. According to Delicia, Ariana and Willie frequently clashed due to their strong personalities. She also mentioned that her granddaughter was Willie's weakness. He had a disturbing obsession with her and would often scream during arguments with Ariana that no one would ever take the child away from him. Within the family, Willie's initial explanation for Ariana's absence was that he had kicked her out of the house. Since Willie was unemployed, he spent all day at home, taking care of his granddaughter and managing the household tasks while Delicia worked late into the night. This routine did not arouse suspicion, even when changes were made to the backyard. However, as time passed, doubts began to emerge from various quarters, not only from Ariana's friends and boyfriend but also from her family, including Delicia. She became increasingly anxious and confronted Willie, asking why he had thrown Ariana out of the house. Willie's response was that he had expelled her because she was pregnant again, and he was not willing to raise another of her children. Cornered, Willie resorted to a final, twisted strategy that ultimately exposed him. Willie first went to the police station to report that his daughter was in the south of the country, but that he had lost contact with her and feared she might have fallen victim to human trafficking. He even wrote and signed a letter, pretending to be Ariana. What he didn't anticipate was that Delicia would immediately recognize the handwriting as not belonging to her daughter. Mauricio was the next witness to take the stand. He recalled being surprised when his father invited him to lunch, given their strained relationship and the fact that they hadn't seen each other in years. Mauricio also recounted numerous instances of his father's violent behavior towards his mother and sisters. After hearing these crucial testimonies and reviewing the overwhelming evidence against him, it was time to listen to the defense. Willie's defense claimed that everything began with an argument. Willie allegedly slapped Ariana, who then grabbed a sharp kitchen utensil. They struggled, and Willie managed to take the weapon from her, ultimately injuring her in the neck. The defense argued that Willie acted in self-defense, asserting that he had no choice but to protect himself. On October 26 of that same year, the judges sentenced Willie to life imprisonment. The court found him solely responsible for the aggravated femicide. After hearing the sentence, Willie uttered a few brief words apologizing to his ex-wife, his family, and his daughter's friends, expressing regret for what had happened, and then fell silent. One of the judges emphasized that Delicia's testimony had revealed a family structure plagued by violence. This brutal environment normalized the conditions that eventually led to Ariana's death at the hands of her father. The judges unanimously agreed that Delicia's account was honest and free of inconsistencies, even though it carried an emotional weight of guilt, as her efforts to keep her family together had ultimately led to the worst possible outcome for her daughter. The reading of the sentence concluded with the judge's observation that although the life sentence couldn't undo the harm done to the family, it would free Delicia and her remaining children from the hell they had endured for years. But this wasn't the last blow Willie Palacios would receive. Believing himself to be the rightful guardian of his granddaughter, he was informed that Luis, his granddaughter's father, had requested custody and been granted it. Luis had also explicitly requested that Willie be denied visitation rights, a request the court agreed was in the best interest of the child. For the obsessed grandfather, this punishment may have been even worse than the life sentence itself. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.